So I will be analyzing I will focus only on the unconditional component of the child benefit program in Poland, because I want to sort of go beyond Poland, not to just limit myself to evaluation of the Polish program. And why is it relevant? You have heard recently about some proposals of universal basic income or other universal cash transfers. They are in general increasingly being discussed in the developing, but also in the developed countries. So there are these two papers that sort of sum up the current considerations. And one of the questions, of course, we economists, we love to ask questions about unintended consequences of programs. So obviously, these programs were designed for mostly for increasing the family's incomes in Poland, also to increase fertility. But we are asking ourselves, but maybe these transfers discourage work, right? Because people are getting money sort of unconditionally. Suddenly they experience an income. Are they sort of increasing their basically free time, their leisure as a response? The problem here is that that the quasi-experimental evidence is still very limited, and because there are identification problems and lack of such policies. I will discuss these identification problems in a second. But first, because it's a long talk, and by the way, if you have any questions, please interrupt me. Also, if you have questions you prefer to ask them at the end, that's fine. But if something is unclear, please ask. Yeah, that's quite a long talk. So let's just give you a brief preview of the results. So what I will analyze this universal child benefit in Poland, and I will analyze the pure income effect of its introduction on maternal labor supply. I will use two data that are available in Poland, which is labor force survey and household budget survey. What I find is that these effects were very small and statistically insignificant, both on extensive and intensive margin. So the conclusion is sort of that that the households have not decided to increase their leisure, their parents, sorry, but actually they increased consumption and savings, and we see that in the data. So that's the results, and the contribution. My most important contribution is this estimation of the pure income effect of a universal cash transfer. We are super interested, in estimating income elasticities of labor supply, but it's usually very difficult because it's all the shocks. Most of the shocks are sort of combined income effects. Here, money is just given for regardless of your income, so that's a very interesting setup. And obviously, also this paper contributes to the literature on family policies, as the child benefit was one of these. It can be defined as one of the family policies. And before going forward, I just wanted, because people are asking me why Poland. So I think this graph tells you why I focused on Poland. So I think there are two takeaways from this graph, which shows you the family benefits as a percentage of average wage. First of all, Poland in 2019 was the country with highest family benefits relative to the average wages, right? There is no other country that has a higher family support for families. You could be a little bit skeptical because there are, maybe I have cherry-picked sort of this couple of 40 years old with 2 children and stuff like that. But this is just for Polish program. It doesn't matter. It's just that in other countries, there are different, the size of the support sort of differs, but this will look similar for all the other brackets, whatever. And the second takeaway is that, in 2015, there was basically no support, no family benefits for most families in Poland. Okay. Also, these families because this family here is not like it's a lower middle class or even a little poor family. They received no support. So the shock that I will be analyzing is really huge. It's unprecedented in the developed countries in the recent years. yeah, we went from 0 to the country with the highest family support for families. Okay, so now I will just shortly talk about these identification problems that are experienced in literature. So in order to sort of microeconometrically estimate these income effects on labor supply, researchers conducted first of all small-sized experiments. There are several of them, both in developing and developed countries. Obviously, the problem is as always, so they are pretty small. Clear whether statewide policy would trigger the same responses. So that's the problem here. And then there is this great papers on lotteries, which I find this identification as sort of my favorite. So basically, we look at people randomly win lotteries, right? So if you're in Sweden and have this great admin data, you can see how people respond to lottery wins. But again, the problem is, okay, maybe first of all, it's not the same as the benefit. Benefit is paid constantly. Second of all, the problem here is that not all of the people participate in lotteries. So it's not clear whether this and then there are papers on statewide UBI programs. There are not a lot of them, so not a lot of programs, so not a lot of papers. And then the problem is that you don't really have a plausible control group, right? So so everyone is covered by the transfer. So who are you going to compare your treatment group to? And so they have to rely on some second best sort of identification strategies like synthetic control and variation in timing of the treatment, which are not perfect. But importantly, there is we could say that there is more or less a consensus in the studies, in their findings, because they basically all find that these effects are pretty small of unconditional cash transfers. All right, so now let's jump into the Polish program, which may be familiar to some of you. So the Polish program, as it was introduced in 2016, had two components. So first of all, there was a means-tested transfer for the first child. So only parents with income below certain threshold could apply for it. And then there was unconditional cash transfers for the second child and each subsequent child, right? So what you see here is basically the amount of child benefit that families with different number of children received after the introduction of child benefit. And what I will be comparing, and okay, so it was already mentioned before my presentation. So let me also refer to this. So the existing studies on this Polish program, they compare parents with one child with parents with 0 children. Okay, so what they sorry, not parents with one child, parents with children to couples without children. So basically what they identify this sort of a mix combination of these effects of the conditional cash benefit and unconditional cash benefit. I'm only interested in this unconditional cash benefit. So what I will do, I will compare mothers and parents, in more generally families of 2 children with parents of 1 child. So the only difference between these 2 groups is that the families with 2 children were eligible for this unconditional cash transfers. Both these families were eligible for the conditional cash benefit, but the parents of 1 child, could not get the child benefit for the second child. All right, and another sort of cool feature of this reform, I mean, cool from the perspective of the econometrician, maybe not so much from the perspective of a policymaker, is that or designer, is that it was introduced extremely rapidly, right? So what happened was that there were elections in October, and within 6 months, they introduced the new government introduced child benefit, and already 6 months later, parents received first. That was really rapid, so there was not a lot of a room for sort of expectations. So I will divide my sample, my pre-treatment, post-treatment, and that this the date that we'll be dividing is January 2016, sort of for to make it easy to interpret, because otherwise we would go into some kind of seasonalities anyway. But I can show you also, but I also have sort of, I start sort of this post-treatment period at other points of time that doesn't change the results. If I look, for example, only from the April or from September when the full coverage was achieved. All right, so do you have any questions on that? Because if not, then I know, yeah. No, okay. So that I use is labor force survey and household budget survey. They have different sort
I'm sorry, can I have one question?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask, because later on the program has been changed. So even if you have one child, you get the benefit. So why don't you look at the later period when all people that have at least one child are eligible to get the benefit, unconditional on their income?
Right. So there are two reasons. First, so it was the program was expanded in 2019. Then it would be kind of difficult because some of these families with one child were receiving the child benefit already. In fact, would be actually sort of going the other way around, because they would suddenly not they would not be forced to have their income below certain thresholds. So so that's the first reason. And then the second reason, I mean, the other important reasons for comparing parents of two children with one child is that they are more sort of similar, right, than comparable than, for example, childless people to people with children. I mean, that's sort of the other reason. But so the effects of I think the effects of expansion of the program are super interesting from many perspectives. But this is a little bit more complicated and not the subject of this paper. And so I finished my exactly for this reason. I finished, in 2018 before the expansion. So okay, so I will use.
Okay,
thank you. The difference in different specification, and the treatment group is basically defined by the number of children that are in the household, and the children are I will only construct this variable based on children aged 3 to 17 to avoid sort of endogeneity, because obviously, in 2018 is my last year, 3 years after the introduction. So, some of the children are children of the program. So I want to sort of, abstract from that, my treatment exogenous, because unfortunately, and that was also something we discussed before the presentation, in Poland, you don't really have panel data, right? I don't have administrative data, so I don't have the longitudinal dimension. These two surveys have a panel dimension, but it's super short. It's like 1 year long. So it wasn't really suitable for, I mean, I could only analyze very short-term effects and very small samples, by the way. In this panel, so that's one caveat, and that's a problem in my paper. The post-treatment is defined as I described before. I will look at labor supply, and my measures of labor supply.
Sorry, it wasn't really suitable for Diamondbacks.
Oh, sorry. And so my measures of labor supply are, first of all, dummy variables like working at least 1 hour in the previous week, non-zero earnings in the household budget survey, and then I have also intensive margins, hours worked, monthly earnings. The sample I will study is partner mothers aged 29 to 49, so prime age. I exclude families that have farm because it's difficult to measure labor supply there, and I also exclude households with children with disabilities. because the labor supply is then limited. Elasticity of labor supply is then limited, but I can, I can remove these restrictions on the sample, and then the results stay the same. Okay, so descriptively, if we agree that this comparison is pretty good, I haven't heard any. So if you establish that this is a good comparison, then let's see what we see first descriptively. Okay, so this is just averages averages from the sample, so that no regressions yet. And what we see here, first of all, is that household income was basically very similar for the two groups, for families with 1 and 2 children, and then we see divergence, right? We see clearly that the treatment group is experiencing an increase in income, a larger increase in income. And secondly, the employment rate, it does not really change over time, right? I mean, this difference is basically stays more or less the same during the whole period. I can also show you, because I have this household budget survey, that the first stage was, so families in the treatment group receive more child benefit than the families in the control group, and it's stable over time. Right, so now, okay, you could be worried that this is repeated cross section, so maybe there is some other variables may affect the results, so I can add a lot of other variables like individual characteristics, year fixed effects, region fixed effects, measure of local labor demand, and even some interactions of these fixed effects. The results stay the same, and they are basically very close to 0. So it's not really, so basically it seems that this program had basically no effect on labor supply. The same if you look at individual earnings. Here it's dollars, so it's like less, $1 less of earnings, and it's obviously insignificant. So it's really nothing. And then if you want to, to sort of show you, at least suggestively, that the parallel trends hold. Here we have this event study plot, which shows that basically there was no divergent trends before, and then afterwards also there is nothing going on, nothing big going on. By the way, the results for fathers are very similar. So fathers also did not increase their labor supply. All right, so then I run a battery of robustness tests. So this novelties in difference literature, W robust estimator, results stay the same, so insignificant, very small. I do randomization inference. The p-value is just super high of the effect. I have this alternative specification where I compare families, with 2 children to families with 3 children. Then you have the variation in sort of the amount of unconditional child benefit received. The effects are similar. As I said, alternative treatment period start does not change the results. And I can, include agriculture, look at single mothers. The effects are still the same. There is something going on in terms of heterogeneity, so I will just show you the education. My partner's occupation, or maybe education. So what we see is that the effects seem to be larger for mothers from lower socioeconomic status, with worse sort of education levels, and unfortunately these samples are too small for me to draw strong conclusions on that. And similarly, unfortunately, something I would want to do, I would want to see heterogeneity based on the income, right? Because on the initial income, sort of the pre-treatment income levels, because obviously these responses should be higher, stronger for families that with low income, relatively larger shock for them. I cannot do that because I don't have panel data, as I said. What I can do is I can look at the partner's occupation husband's occupation in this, partner's occupation. And what we see is that again these effects are stronger for families in which partner is low skilled, so probably the income is lower. So there might be something here, and it would be great to be able to use admin data to prove it. I'm trying to get it, and it's difficult, and I'm not sure that I will get it in the end. But there might be something here. All right, so if not, if not increasing their leisure, what these families did with this additional income. So first of all, reassuringly, household income increased, disproportionately in the treatment group. Household earnings were not affected. Here we look at the total household sort of variables, right? So household expenditure increased, and household savings increased even more. So what these households did was basically increasing their expenditure and savings. And another issue that's super important for this program is whether it succeeded in achieving, in reducing the poverty. Here I show you the results, the effects on the extreme poverty. Only this unconditional component is responsible for a reduction of extreme poverty by 1/3 basically of the pre-treatment levels, right? So this reduction is really substantial at no big labor supply costs sort of. Obviously that doesn't close the discussion because it's extremely expensive program. And again, this is not really it's outside of the scope of my paper to discuss the efficiency and stuff. But one important aspect, because sometimes these economists say that okay, we could reduce this poverty, but by the same number with less money, right? But they forget that there is also something called politics in this involved, and sort of a shameless self-promotion of my another paper. So basically with Katarzyna and Michał from the University of Warsaw, we look at the effects of this program on the support for the ruling party, for the party that introduced this transfer. This is important because, as we know, especially from the Polish experience, reforms, they not only they need to be sort of financially sustainable, but we cannot really forget about the political sustainability of reforms. So what we see here, so what we do, we analyze the effects on the voting. This is the revealed preferences, so these are the election results, and we see that in municipalities that received more we see huge effect on the support for the ruling party, but only after the introduction of the program. Okay, the promise was not enough. People did not sort of probably believe in the promise, so only after they received, they actually increased their introduction. The paper is still work in progress, not yet out, but it should be out soon. I will present it also at the conference in January, so stay tuned for this paper. All right, so just to sum up my presentation, I think I'm on time. So I analyzed the impact of this large universal cash transfers on parental labor supply, and these effects are very small. Importantly, these are obviously partial equilibrium effects. These are effects on recipients, and general equilibriums could differ. But as this paper by Johnson Marinescu shows, this is rather unlikely. Efficiency, as I said, this is not the topic of this study. So it seems that the unconditional cash transfers recipients, their income is increased, but these unconditional cash transfers do not distort their labor supply decisions. Obviously, I would want to be able to extend these results to universal basic income, because it's super hot topic at the moment. And I think to some extent, yes, it's possible to extend this this because the transfer is large enough, as I showed you before in this international context graph.